Good morning from Okinawa, Japan, home of OkiSubies. Today, we are working on a SF5 Forester. This is a turbo 5-speed all-wheel drive model found here in Japan. It is not the STI. Most of the STIs came automatic. This is the 5-speed. We have a lot that we're going to do to this car. This customer's about to head back to the States here soon, and he wanted all the JDM goodies before he left. So we are merging our first Forester. We are also installing a full drivetrain from a SG9 Forester STI. So that's 6-speed Brimbos, subframes, lateral links, everything. And so a lot of you wanted to know how to drop transmissions, how to do the steering racks, and a lot of miscellaneous maintenance questions were asked, and so we're going to be able to address most of them with this. We've already have a video of pulling an engine that's on the Bug Eye series. Check that out. So we won't cover pulling the engine, but we're going to clean this car up. It came in pretty dirty, really stock. It's going to leave extremely clean, a completely different look on life. Yeah, so stay tuned. For the engine, like we stated, we're going to be merging this car, the first merge Forester that OkiSubies has ever done. And here in Japan, we have this thing called shaken. It's an inspection that's necessary for the cars to be on the road. And so all the EJ20 platforms here in Japan are mostly EJ20s. And the Forester STIs, the SG9s, they are 2.5 liters. So it's stamped on the block EJ205. So right here is the EJ20, if you can see that. And so that's what helps us pass these inspections. We can take any engine, as long as it's EJ20, stamped EJ20, and put it in any other car. And so we're going to stay with that platform. This is an EJ205, so it's an EJ20, EJ205. It has variable cam timing, and we're going to be installing in this car. What we chose to do, though, to keep that theme going with the SG9, it's got a manifold with TGV deletes. It has STI pink injectors, and it also has the VF41 turbo is what we're going to be installing on it. Right now it's not installed, but it's going to have a VF41 turbo, a 6-speed clutch, of course. Install all that good stuff. Of course, we're going to clean up the engine too before we install it. It's going to be a night and day difference in this car. So like I stated, we have a video on the Bug Eye series on how to remove the engine. But just to recap for those who are watching this video, when removing the engine, you want to remove the radiator, the accessories, the intercooler comes out, the air box comes off. We removed the windshield wiper reservoir and the battery too, just for access, ease of access. Then after everything, all of those that I just mentioned are off, then the downpipe, the bell housing bolts, the motor mount bolts, and then pull it. That's pretty much it. You also have to pull the pin out of the transmission where the fork is. So that is how easy an engine is to remove. And we're going to remove that right now. So this is what an engine looks like in. And this is what it looks like with the engine out. Engine removal is really simple. If you follow those steps that we put in place, and if you watch that Bug Eye video, you'll know exactly how to remove the engine. Really simple process. Next up is subframes. We're going to start with the front subframe. We're going to make it really simple and easy. No reason to get crazy. If you saw the subframes we did earlier with the drivetrain from the SG9 Forester, we dropped it all at one time. And that's really easy if you have a lift. But if you don't have a lift, best thing to do is to do it one at a time. Take it easy, go simple and slow. That way you're not over complicating things. So how we're gonna do it is gonna take the pitch mount and rehang the transmission. We'll pop the axles out of the hubs, and then we're going to drop the front subframe. We'll break that down for you, dropping the subframe. But once the subframe is down, then we'll remove the transmission fully with the drive shaft. We'll get the other 6-speed transmission that's coming in. We'll install it, and then we'll reinstall the front subframe from the SG9, and then we'll move to the rear subframe. We won't install the engine yet because we still have to do the merge, right? So we got to pull the wiring harness and everything. But yeah, that's how we're gonna go about doing this.
All right, so to remove the subframe, you're going to be doing the same thing on both sides, but you have two 19s on the control arm, right? So when you do an anti-lift kit, for example, these are the back two 19 mils. Then you're going to remove the caliper. You're going to remove the brake line. Well, actually, you don't have to remove the brake line from the suspension. The suspension's staying in. So you remove the caliper, these two big bolts here. Then you will remove the ABS line out, which is on the back. So on the back side over here. The 17's on the back side over there. But yeah, well, we'll just go ahead and rock it real quick and show you. There's a camber bolt on this car. Usually it would just be both 19. Where's the 17? A little bit of an extension. So we have taken apart the left and right hand side hub and control arm assemblies, and now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be dropping the subframe here shortly after we take the 17 nuts on the bottom of the frame here. But if you just look in here again, we're doing the pitch mount. Look at that tiny little skinny one on the SF5 Forester. That thing is tiny. But you put the pitch mount back in. We take out the bolt completely for the shifter linkage, and you mark it to try to get it back to as close as you can. The drive shafts are popped out of the transmission. Those are, one side is still in the hub. We couldn't get it out, but we pulled out the other one completely. But yeah, I'm going to show you. We're going to take out the 17 real quick. Gotta get a long extension. All the control arms and axles and whatnot are in the way. Just get a long one that'll slide somewhat right in there. Yeah, eventually.
Of course, you want to have the subframe supported by a jack or jack stands, or however you want to do it. If you got somebody that likes to go to the gym,
yep,
those guys.
If you didn't know that without us explaining it, please don't do this job. Kind of joking, kind of serious. All right. So we've taken all that apart now, and if you look right here, that metal piece right there, they're actually spacers. If you've ever noticed inside of a Forester's, whether it's SF5 or SG5 or 9, the engines actually sit lower. and that is actually correct. They do sit lower, and there's also spacers on the transmission cross mount too. You can get rid of those, put Impreza cross mount, and then take those spacers out, bring your engine up a little bit. It does change the performance of it. It's a lot of work, so I'd only recommend it if you're actually driving the car a lot, tracking it, doing gymkhana and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll start to lower it. And usually it'll get caught on there, but today the lower is on our side and it just goes ahead and
it's
right back on the side. Boom, just like that. And as you can see, the subframe is completely off on the bottom. The transmission is just floating. So we'll take all this out. We'll put the jack back underneath the transmission, take the pitch mount off and the cross member off, and then the drive shaft, unplug it from the middle back and take it from the diff. But we'll show you dropping the transmission also.
So in removing the transmission, really simple now that there's nothing else holding on to it in the front. There's 4 bolts here. They're all 14s. The older vehicles, they have this smog system. You can pull that out. We won't need it anymore with the new engine. And there's 2 17s, one right here, one on the other side, and that will remove the cradle, the cross member that's holding the transmission up. Once that's removed, it'll pretty much be free floating. We have the jack underneath it. And then for the drive shaft, there's 2 14s midway. Now hold the carrier bearing, one, and there's one on the other side. And then further back is like a plate that protects the drive shaft from hitting the ground if there's something to break. There's 6 14mm bolts that hold that. And then where the drive shaft connects to the diff, there's 4 12mm bolts and nuts there that you need to take out. Once those are all removed, last thing you have is the steering link or the shifter linkage. Let me show you how to remove that inside the car. Normally when disconnecting and dropping a transmission, we disconnect the linkage from the bottom side of the car. There's no reason why we should have to come inside the car, but because the linkage is being swapped out with the 6-speed stuff, we're gonna remove everything from the inside, so when the transmission drops, it'll just all come together as one unit. So to do that, I've already pre-removed some of these screws. You'll get access to the linkage area right here through those 2 panels, and then there's 6 Phillips screws right here. You're literally going to remove those. I'm not going to do it for the video, but you'll remove all 6 of them and then push the rubber, remove this metal piece and push the rubber underneath the car. There's also 2 bolts underneath the car that I forgot to show you, but you'll see them. You cannot remove it without. There's 2 bolts that hold the back side of the linkage to the body of the car. You'll have to remove those as well. But you can also, I normally do, remove them from inside the car once I have this metal plate off. But that's it. That's all that you need to do. Engine, transmission, front subframe, all have been removed. It's a good looking car. We'll take the time to clean everything up. Then it'll be bringing over the 6-speed, hanging it, and then the front subframe and installing it too. So yeah, it's all pulled out. It only took us a little while. We had some customers we had to speak with and show a couple cars and whatnot, but it's a really simple process. This assembly is always the simplest, right? You'll run into issues when you're putting it back together, and if we do run into any issues, we'll show you how we fix them. But yeah, this is it. Good day's work. And it's interesting that the front one actually was a different diameter, a different style bolt. Never seen that before. SF5. Interesting.
SF5 differences. As long as the pitch of the bolt is the same, we'll probably still be able to use the SG9 stuff.
First down real quick. Like this side. So much. Okay, and then before letting it down, of course, you want to check sure nothing is holding it up. I'm not gonna break or pull anything. Yeah, Kevin. Yeah, it looks like
back end is wanting to come down last. Sorry.
And that is a rear subframe for you right there. Really simple and easy. We'll drag this out of the way, get the other subframe in place, and it is literally reverse order. You'll put the jack underneath the diff, jack it up, put those 4 bolts in that we just took out, and reassemble everything. Bolts right in. Really cool. Subaru is really cool.
And as you can see, there's nothing fancy going on here, guys. We are literally on jack stands, doing everything here, right? Full 6-speed swaps and everything like that, right? So lifts, as convenient as it can be, is not necessary. You just gotta kind of manhandle them things out from underneath the car. Make sure you don't knock them jacks out as you're doing it. It'll be tight. Done it numerous times. Right, so we figured we'd go ahead and do a detailed comparison video too. Like, why are we doing the 6-speed conversion? Why are we putting everything from the SG9 in? And there's just, everything is so different. So when you do a 6-speed conversion, there's a couple ways that you could do it. This is the R180 diff. Your R160 drive shafts will not go into your R180 diff. You would have to do something with the axles. And if you use these axles, the splines on the inner portion that goes inside the hubs are also bigger. So that means you would need hubs. If you need hubs, then that means you need Brembos. You essentially need everything if you want to use an STI factory rear end. Like Super Dave has hybrid axles where you can put the R180 diff with stock hubs. If you wanted to do it a little bit cheaper, you would just mix up, make a hybrid drive shaft with R180 inner portions with R160 outer portions. But this is definitely the better way of doing it. It's just way more solid. But yeah, so the difference is R180 diff, bigger axles. The hubs are beefier. If you look on the back side, the actual inner shoes are also wider than the R160 stuff. You have Brembos. Even the OEM SG9 sway bar is actually pretty thin compared to even still the Imprezas. But it's still a little bit thicker than that pencil over there. Yeah, and if you do it this way, just the whole subframes. What else is different, Dylan? Oh, the lateral links. The lateral links are aluminum.
Solid aluminum. Look at them.
Yeah, so I mean, maybe hollow, but for the most part, they're
There's C-channel ones right here. Super likely to bend in an accident or whatever.
And the cool thing about these aluminum ones, right, is these set up specifically for you to get these in an Impreza. It would have to be like 05 and up. They actually had just like the normal like metal ones. They weren't the aluminum ones. But even from the Zenki, the pre-facelift Forester STI has this style. The whole drivetrain is very similar to like an 05 and up. The steering rack we were talking about earlier, doing the SF5 steering rack in here. We're gonna probably have to weld that joint. We realized later on, oh yeah, the STI Foresters have a different style steering rack, like a newer one. It's just a different mounting. We'll show you guys that later on. But yeah, well, this is the difference between the whole, this is just the rear end, right? So we'll go ahead and pull up the front end. Well, actually, let's go over here. Front end's a lot easier. Hubs are pretty much the same. Brembos bolt onto a front hub from an SF5, like you can do that conversion. The biggest difference with this front end is really the control arms. As you can see here, the control arms are aluminum. If you're in the States, yeah, I think in an SF chassis, this would already be JDM. Like, there's no aluminum control arm for the States side, I think. But in Japan, also the SF5 has like the metal style one. It's not aluminum, mild steel, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, so the aluminum control arms. And with the front and rear, yeah, 1 centimeter, 10 millimeter difference. It's definitely wider than the SF stuff. So wheels it'll be more of an aggressive stance. But yeah, that is the difference between the front and the rear. We're gonna go ahead and all start slapping this stuff back in there.
Okay, so we got the subframe in position, the SG9 one. We're just gonna jack it up slowly.
So the reason why Dylan's getting a screwdriver is if you see the middle hole, if you've ever seen the upgraded subframe bolts, they actually bolt straight in there. And what you can do is you can move the subframe with a screwdriver there while you're installing it too. Need a little bit more play?
No?
No?
Looks like I got it.
Coming down on the jack. Well, actually what I'll do is I'll bring it up just a little bit so that the diff cross member piece, the big giant T mount, won't be so far down, and we can just bolt it up together. All right. So now that we got the two 17s there, we'll start with the trailing arm, get the 3 in there, but we will also start doing T-cross member here for the diff, and get there the plate with the 2 12 mils in there, and just going backwards now.
So with the rear subframe installed, we went ahead and did just like we explained that we were going to do. We put the 6-speed transmission in, bolted it to the bottom of the car using the actual cross member. So we got the transmission suspended by the pitch mount, and then it bolted to the chassis or to the body of the car by the cross member. So now this is just suspended right here, hanging out. And so we're going to now install the front subframe and then connect the axles and everything, and it'll be a rolling chassis again, which will be great. But something we should explain, each model has its own speed sensors. So, you know, version 1 through 3, 4, by itself, and then 5 and 6, they have their own speed sensors, right? So this is a speed sensor that sits in the transmission that came out of the Forester. This is not going to be used with this Forester simply because it's an older model. So it uses a version 4 style speed sensor. And so just a tip, make sure to work on the vehicle when you have ample room. Trying to get this speed sensor out with the engine and downpipe and everything in would be extremely difficult. So take the time to do things when they're easy. Same thing with cleaning up the engine bay. It's empty, so we're going to clean up the engine bay and do things that is easy with the engine out and whatnot. So yeah, next step is to install the speed sensor, then position the front cross member, jack it up, get it installed. The only thing that we're going to have to do different that we explained in the beginning, we're not going to be switching out the steering racks because of the 07 subframe is different. So the steering rack from the SF5 will not bolt up, and so we're just going to modify the joint. So the steering joint, we're just going to cut it, measure, weld, go about our day, do burnouts.
Another bonus feature, a bonus tip, if you have those speed sensors, 1, 2, 3, the mechanical speed sensors in a JDM GC8, the earlier models, the version 4, all these, you can just take out the speed sensor and just slap in the one that goes to your car for doing the 6-speed swap. So speed sensors are pretty easy solutions on all the Impreza platforms for the most part. The newer 6-speeds, 08 and up, don't even have a speed sensor. It's ran through the ABS, so that one's a little bit different. So if you have anything older than a 2007, just get an 02 or 04 to 07, like Blobeye or Hawkeye 6-speed transmission.
With the transmission being held by the pitch mount, everything's kind of out of the way and ready for the front subframe. So the front subframe, you want to position it underneath the car, and the front subframe in this case consists of everything. We kept the rotors and the calipers and sway bar, everything attached to the front subframe. Even the lower control arms, which are aluminum in this case, the factory ones were steel, which is really it's a good upgrade. And so you place it on the subframe on the jack. There's a jack pad on the subframe that guards the power steering rack and the sway bar, and you jack it up from there. And on the body of the car are studs coming down from the engine bay area. And so the subframe, you want to jack it up slowly until you meet those studs, and then you'll put the nuts on them, and they're just 17 millimeter nuts right here, located on both sides of the car, and that will attach the subframe to the body. And then after that's done, you can let the jack down, and you want to attach the suspension to the hubs, or because the suspension stay in the car, right? So you want to attach the hubs to the suspension. The lower control arm bolts with 19 millimeter bolts to the body of the car. You also have your steering rack that's got the input shaft for the steering rack. It connects to the steering wheel using a joint. We did have to modify it on this car because I think we already went over that. The subframe was different, so we had to modify that joint. Really simple process if you have both joints. Another thing we had to modify in the rear, it all worked out. It was all plug and play, but the front, for the ABS sensors, we had to use the sensors from the Forester because the ABS is read off of the axle rather than on the hub. The hub on the SF5 had a very large diameter ring that the ABS picked its signal off of. Yeah.
So as you can see, the 12 millimeter, and this is the ABS sensor, because the teeth for the ABS being read are on the axles for the newer models. When you have an older model GC8 or SF, this ABS is facing this way, and there's a ring on the hub. Here is the old SF5, and you can see the ABS rings are on here. So instead of the ABS sensor facing down, it faces to this piece right here. So yeah, repinning. It's just a black and white wire. There's 2 wires to the ABS sensor. You just we literally cut it, and then we splice it together, and then put the SF5 piece back on the harness side, and it worked out. Here is also the connector. So this connector is a little bit different. This is also from an SF5 style, but you can see the ABS sensor in this one. This is just an old one that we have laying around. But yeah, you can cut this, take the white and black wire, and you would splice that into the GD one, and this still connects into the SF5 system, and you have just a relocated ABS. It's a reluctant sensor, so it's just those teeth. It reads each tooth. So as it goes around, and then you lock up the brakes, it stops the reading, and it knows that you have a locked up tire. It's a very simple system, so you can do this type of stuff. So it works out.
So with the engine back in and the interior all back together, we have a few things we need to wrap up on. If you feel like you missed out on something by not seeing us put the engine back in, check out our other videos with engines being removed, engines being installed. We have some detailed videos. Check them out. All right, and so right now with tidying up, what we have to do is we changed out the slave cylinder that goes to the 6-speed. We took the 5-speed one out, and I've used the 6-speed slave cylinder, so we need to bleed the clutch. So a good rule of thumb is to make sure you have fluid. We use .3, .4 if you want to. We're not race car drivers, so it's .3, .4. Either one will work. You want to top off the reservoir here. And on the older models, on the GC8s, they only have the bleeder down here on the slave cylinder, but on this Forester there's one up here too, on the firewall. So the method we're going to use is we're going to be pumping it up, and it's not like the brakes where you can pump it 3 or 4 times and then hold. It's one of those you have to put some time into it to get the air out, and I'm not too sure why that is, but in any case we're going to pump it up and hold, and then break them loose down at the slave cylinder, and then we're going to pump it up again and then break it loose over here at this one, and we're just going to alternate. You can get a lot of air out of this top one, and you shouldn't have to touch it again, but we're gonna just alternate between until we get a good pedal. Clutch has been bled, got a good feel to it now. All the air is out of the system. We got most of the air out here up on top because it's the highest point, air is gonna go up. So now that the clutch is bled and all the fluids are in, we use 5W40 Castrol Edge full synthetic here. We also mix our own coolant here, our own antifreeze. Make sure all your power steering stuff is automatic transmission fluid, ATF. That's what Subaru recommends. And so everything's topped off, and so let's start up our first merged SF5. Check for leaks. Looking pretty good.
Keep in mind, this is an EJ2005 with a Forester STI turbo intercooler and EJ207 pink injectors. No check engine light, idling's good. As you can see, fully, you couldn't even tell, stock dash. Still got to put a 6-speed shift knob on there, but good. It's alive.